Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into a big one. How much car can you actually afford?
Yeah, it seems simple,
Right.
right? But you look online and there are just so many different formulas. Sometimes they even clash.
Exactly. And, whether you're super detailed with your budget or just trying not to get underwater with your car, we want to bring some clarity today, give you some solid takeaways.
For sure. We've pulled together some interesting stuff. There's a YouTube video from Charlie Chang, very practical advice there. Then we've got ratehub.ca, which gives us a good Canadian viewpoint, lots of data.
Okay.
And just for a bit of contrast on how people spend, we've even got a report from Grandview Research on the luxury handbag market in the U.S.
Right, an interesting mix. So our mission here isn't just to list off rules. We want to really get into these sources, pull out the key stuff you need to make a smart decision for your own situation, your own finances.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first up, Charlie Chang, in his video, he really flags this danger zone. Getting fixated on the monthly payment figure when you're at the dealership.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's easy to see why that happens. Salespeople are good at framing it that way. Look how low this monthly payment is.
Right.
But it can be really misleading. RateHub also hammers this point home.
Wow.
You have to look at the total cost, not just that appealing monthly number.
Yeah, because they might just be stretching the loan out for 7 years or something, and suddenly you're paying a ton more in interest overall, even if the monthly looks low.
Precisely. Which kind of leads us nicely into this guideline that, both Charlie Chang and RateHub mention, the 24/10 rule.
Ah, yes, the classic. Can you walk us through what that actually means?
Sure. So 24/10, it stands for 20% down payment on the car, a loan term no longer than 4 years, and keeping your total car cost, so that's payment, insurance, gas, maintenance, everything under 10% of your gross monthly income.
Okay, 10% of your income before taxes. Got it. Let's break down why those numbers are there. The 20% down payment, that's mostly about depreciation, right? So you don't owe more than the car's worth straight away.
Exactly that. Depreciation hits hardest early on. RateHub actually mentioned used cars in Canada saw a 20.4% annual depreciation rate in 2023. So that 20% down gives you a buffer. And, putting more down also just means you borrow less, pay less interest. RateHub had an example with a $65,000 car, bigger down payment, saves a lot in interest over the loan.
Makes sense. And the 4-year loan limit, that's purely about minimizing the total interest paid, stopping those really long loans from costing a fortune.
Yeah, basically. Longer loans mean lower monthly payments, which looks attractive.
Sure.
But you end up paying way more interest overall. RateHub's 65K example, again, going from 4 to 8 years, nearly double the interest paid. It's a huge difference.
Wow. Okay. And then the 10% of income part, Charlie Chang's pretty clear this isn't just the car payment, right?
Right. He stresses it's the total cost payment, insurance, fuel, repairs, the whole lot. You need to factor all that in to see if you're under that 10% ceiling.
And he even breaks that 10% down further, doesn't he? Like different levels of comfort.
He does, yeah. He suggests 5% is kind of the safe zone. 15% is maybe a semi-target. Getting towards 20% is pushing it. And over 30% he calls, keeping up with the Joneses territory.
Oh, okay.
So he really pushes for staying in that 5 to 15% range if he can.
But RateHub throws a bit of a wrench in the works here, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, this 24/10 rule is a bit outdated, especially in Canada now.
Well, yeah, that's a really important point they make. With car prices going up and the general cost of everything, RateHub did the math. They reckoned for a household to actually follow the 24/10 rule, for 2 average new cars in Canada today, they'd need an income over $374,000.
Whoa. Okay, so clearly not realistic for most people then.
Not really, no. It shows how much things have changed. Relying solely on that old rule might not be practical anymore.
So, if 24/10 isn't the perfect answer for everyone now, what other ways do our sources suggest we figure this out? Charlie Chang mentioned some other ideas.
He did. He brings up Dave Ramsey first.
Yeah.
This super conservative approach. Only buy a car you can pay cash for, period.
Right. Very strict.
Then he talks about the 50-30-20 budget rule.
Yeah.
That's 50% of your after-tax income for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings debt.
Okay, and how does the car fit into that?
Well, transportation falls under needs,
Mm-hmm.
and Charlie Chang's take is that ideally, only about 20% of that 50% needs chunk should go towards your car costs.
Ah, okay. So it depends on your other needs, like housing. If housing is expensive, less room for the car in that 50%.
Exactly. It forces you to see the car cost in relation to your other essential spending.
Yeah.
It's all about trade-offs, really.
He also makes a point about the sticker price not being the real price, right? The sneaky extra cost.
Oh, yeah. Super important. Taxes, fees, registration. Charlie Chang suggests budgeting an extra 10% on top of the car's price just to cover all that stuff.
10%? That can be thousands, depending on the car.
For sure. It's easy to forget, but you absolutely need to factor it in from the start.
And then there are all the costs after you buy it, the ongoing stuff.
Absolutely. Purchase price is just the entry fee. Insurance is huge. Charlie Chang notes young drivers or people in certain cities pay way more. RateHub estimates, $143 a month on average in Canada.
Wow.
Then Fuel Rate Hub says maybe $203 a month. And maintenance, repairs, they put that around $79 a month per household.
It all adds up fast.
It really does. And Charlie Chang says not calculating that total cost of ownership is like one of the biggest mistakes people make. It leads to serious budget stress down the line.
Okay, so given all these costs, what are some smart strategies our sources recommend for actually making a car affordable?
Well, one big one from Charlie Chang is considering a used car, specifically one that's about 2 or 3 years old.
Why that age range?
Because that's usually after the steepest depreciation's already happened. He gave an example. A $30,000 car might lose $6,000 value in year 1, maybe $3,000 in year 2, $2,000 in year 3. So if you buy it after year 2 or 3, you miss that biggest initial hit.
Right, let someone else pay for that steepest drop. But he added a warning to that, didn't he? About which used cars.
Yes, crucial point. He says this strategy works best with brands known for reliability and lower maintenance costs. Think Toyota, Honda.
Okay.
Because buying a used luxury car that's depreciated a lot might seem like a deal, but then you get hit with potentially massive repair bills later, which kind of wipes out the saving.
Gotcha. Makes sense. What about RateHub's advice?
RateHub focuses more on practicality. Buy the cheapest car that meets your actual needs. Really question whether you need that big SUV for one camping trip a year, or if a smaller, more efficient car works for 99% of your driving.
And they mentioned renting for those occasional needs, too.
Yeah, sometimes renting an SUV for that one trip is way cheaper overall than owning and insuring it year-round.
Charlie Chang also had an interesting point about the down payment size influencing the monthly budget percentage, didn't he?
He did. His thinking is, if you're putting down less than 20%, you probably have less of an emergency fund cushion. So in that case, you should aim for an even lower percentage of your monthly income going to the car payment, just to be safer.
Ah, that's smart. And the opposite for people who could pay cash.
Right. If you could pay cash but choose to finance for some reason, maybe you can handle a slightly higher percentage because you have that underlying financial security.
And both sources seem pretty wary of those really long loan terms dealerships push.
Oh, definitely. Charlie Chang mentions 60, even 72-month loans are common now. The 24/10 rule says max 4 years for a reason keeps interest down. Longer terms just cost you more, way more.
So how do you figure out your number then?
Well, Charlie Chang recommends using free online loan calculators. You can plug in your down payment, your desired loan term, the interest rate you expect, and see what payment that spits out. Build your own formula based on your reality.
Makes sense. Personalize it.
Yeah. And he also threw out a simpler guideline. Try not to spend more than, say, 30% of your total yearly income on the car's purchase price. Just a quick check.
Okay. And RateHub had that chart too, looking at household income.
Yeah, they had a table showing affordable purchase prices based on different percentages of household income, assuming an 8-year loan, which is longer than the 4-year rule, mind you, and average running costs.
Right.
So, for example, they showed a $75,000 household income might support around a $67,000 car if you allocate 20% of income towards it.
Yeah.
But again, that's with an 8-year loan, and they noted that amount could be split across multiple cars if needed.
So different ways to slice it, but all pointing towards needing a personalized approach.
Exactly.
Now, just quickly, let's touch on that Grandview research report on luxury handbags. Seems random, but what's the connection?
Well, it's a really interesting contrast, actually. That market is growing billions of dollars, driven by, disposable income, social media, seeing handbags as status symbols, even potential investments.
Right, people spending huge amounts on a Chanel or Gucci bag.
Exactly. And looking at why people spend that money, status, style, maybe investment value, it highlights the different motivations we have for spending compared to, needing a car for transport.
So it shows spending isn't always purely rational or needs-based.
Precisely. Cars are often a need, but let's be honest, the specific car we choose often involves a lot of want, too, right? That desire for a certain brand or features or image, it taps into similar emotional drivers as luxury goods, even if the core function is different. It shows what personal finance decisions really are.
That's a great point. Okay, so as we wrap this up, what's the main takeaway for listeners trying to figure out their own car budget?
I think the biggest thing is there's no magic number. No single rule works for everyone anymore. You have to look at your own situation, your income, your other expenses, your debts, your goals.
Hmm.
Use the insights from places like Charlie Chang and RateHub, sure, but blend them to make, like Charlie Chang said, your own custom formula.
And crucially, look beyond that monthly payment. Focus on the total cost of ownership, purchase price, fees, insurance, gas, maintenance, the lot.
Absolutely critical. Get the full picture. Only then can you really know if you can afford it without putting yourself under financial stress.
Okay, so here's a final thought to chew on. Cars cost a lot of money, and they usually go down in value. Thinking about that huge chunk of cash, what else could you potentially invest in? Maybe assets that grow or experiences that enrich your life that might give you more long-term value or just, more happiness. Something to consider when weighing up that next car purchase. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.